What's up, everybody? This is your boy Chainsaw. Well, you want to talk about controversy? I got a hell of a lot of it for you here today. Listen, folks, this is one that I don't really delve too deep into sometimes, and that may be the problem. I was recently advised, informed that for the most part, my audience may some of the messages whenever I do brush up on this particular topic, it may fall on deaf ears because some members of my audience, and you know, let's face it, a lot of folks are much better people, first of all, than me, are much better informed than me. I am no authority on any of this stuff. To be honest, I'm like nearly 100% the other guy when it comes down to it. There is so much out there that I still have plenty to learn about, and you know what that does not include is how marginalized people deal with bigots. So, just to inform you, I know every single possible thing there is to know about that from firsthand experience. That being said, when it comes to marginalized communities that are not the communities that I belong to, yeah, there are some spots where I am still brushing up on some things, and when it comes to all of this topic, uh, there's still plenty that your boy Chainsaw does still have plenty to learn about, and I was informed that it may be possible that some in my audience may also have no idea what the fuck it is that I'm talking about. And so today, the title of this segment, what is a TERF and why should you care? Um, and that's not just to say that, you know, cause I'm pretty sure 100,000% that, you know, that trans folks and non-binary folks know exactly why the fuck they should care about what a TERF is and what it is that they do and how it is that they feel about things. But why should you know cis normies care? You know, be they cis straight or cis queer normies? Why should they care what a TERF is and how does that shit affect them? Because for the most part, I can already tell you that a lot of folks don't, and your boy Chainsaw included, didn't until recently realize how much that personally affects you on a day-to-day basis. Even if you come across a situation where you just so happen to be in a vacuum and you have no contact with anyone from the trans community, and you know no one who is trans or non-binary, this shit will ultimately affect you. And even in places like good old red Missouri, in your tiny towns of 2,000 people in the middle of fucking nowhere. So sit back and relax and enjoy the show, y'all. Now I can already hear from the dissenters, especially all the cis bros, being like, "Oh, bro, what? Chainsaw's gonna go on some sort of effeminate you know, thing. It's feminists they just wanna cut all of our dicks off and tell us what to do, and they want to make us do stuff, and they want us to conform to the you know, there's no such thing as patriarchy. It's the matriarchy, bro. It's toxic femininity, bro. It's what the fuck else? It's misandry, bro. That's all it is. It's yeah, this is for you. You know, so you definitely gonna learn some things today. On the other side of that, I can also hear the dissenting voices talking about, oh my god, this is mansplaining. Well, it wouldn't be mansplaining if this was something that you already knew. So, and I have a feeling, based on just kind of what I've seen, heard, and viewed with my own two eyes on social media and my own two ears out and around the communities there, that this is going to be a lot of information that folks just don't seem to know that it affects them or that they may be part of the problem. So, you also might want to sit back and relax. And you know, you might learn something here, because Jesus Christ, I know that I did. And it was frightening how little I knew, especially asking folks who I assumed knew quite a bit regarding this topic. But let's just jump into this real quick. I want to first go over my sources, right, or my resources here. So Grinnell College, it's a private liberal arts college in Grinnell, Iowa. It's founded in 1846. A group of New England congressionalists established trustees of Iowa College. If you Google Grinnell College of Iowa, people ask, what is Grinnell College famous for? School is known for its strong social activism, ranking top among schools of its size and sending volunteers to the Peace Corps. Grinnell's social consciousness stems back to FDR's presidency when several Grinnell graduates became influential New Deal administrators. Well, that's pretty neat in and of itself, right? Um, let's You can go to grinnell.edu to learn more about the college, but I'm gonna reference their wiki page because it's just a short read, right? Okay, Gene. So we're reading from wiki. You know what? It includes references, folks. Try and change something on Wikipedia and see how long you can not get your IP. See how long you can last without having your IP banned or blocked from Wiki. I'm just saying. Um, so Union of Grinnell's student dining workers. It's a very forward-thinking, college here. Grinnell students founded the Union of Grinnell Student Dining Workers to represent student workers in the college's dining hall in 2016. It was the first undergraduate student union at a private college in the U.S. April 26, 2022, members of the union voted 327 to 6 to expand the union to all hourly paid student workers on campus. This made Grinnell have the first and only fully unionized student worker body in the country. So, you know, that's a thing. Social activities and organizations. Students at Grinnell adhere to an honor system known as self-governance, wherein they are expected to govern their own choices and behavior with minimal direct intervention by the college administration. Cultivating a community based on freedom of choice, self-governance aims to encourage students to become responsible, respectful, and accountable members of the campus, town, and global community, and so on, and so on. So the reference we're going to at least look at first is Subcultures in Sociology is an ongoing project by Grinnell College. Students and Dr. Ross Hainfler, oh Jesus, Ross Hainfler, Dr. Ross Hainfler's Deviance and Youth Subcultures course. Our goals include learning about various people and groups labeled deviant, providing sociological analysis of deviant subcultures, and sharing sociological theory, sharing our knowledge with others, academics and non-academics alike, in an accessible way, providing resources for readers to learn more on their own. Now, firstly, you can't discuss TERFs without discussing what is a TERF? Where do they come from? Well, we're going to deep dive into that. Firstly, we'll look at Grinnell and their courses, and then we'll look at some other things real quick. So, what is feminism? Sometimes called womanism. OED defines feminism as an advocacy of equality of the sexes and the establishment of the political, social, and economic rights of the female sex. Yet from its inception, feminism's definitions and scope has been widely contested. Of course, it's a radical ideology in its formation, right? As different voices within the movement range widely on its meaning, purposes, and values, feminism becomes difficult to define. We can see this variety of voices in its four historical waves of feminism. What? I know. I didn't know this was a thing either until I knew it was a thing. I just thought feminism. It sounds like what it sounds like. But no, there are people out there working significantly harder than me, or probably most of the folks who are going to be coming across this and actually watching it to the end, or I would definitely say more than the vast majority who have already clicked off of this video. Probably need to go ahead and come back. Feminism emerged in the 18th century and has in that time gone through four different waves, which are united by shared ideological and historical meanings. It's interesting as they go because it just gets more and more inclusive as they go. But of course, there's pushback. Over time, feminism definitions has expanded to include gender nonconforming, non-binary, transgender people, allowing it to become more and more intersectional, which is we'll get to that. As subcultural participants, women find ways to resist forces of patriarchy and misogyny, of course, yet they often find themselves marginalized as these forces act in subcultural space. Studying feminist theory can help us understand how and why subcultures become sites of both feminist resistance and oppression. Second wave, okay, so your first wave feminism, we'll jump over here for that. First wave feminism, period of feminist activity and thought that occurred between the 19th and 20th century throughout the Western world. It focused on legal issues, primarily securing women's right to votes, suffragettes and whatnot, right? Pretty simple, pretty basic stuff. The term first wave itself was coined by journalist Martha Lear, New York Times Magazine, in 68, though, entitled The Second Feminist Wave. So they were already considering a split difference between first wave and second wave. First wave feminism is characterized as focusing on the fight for women's political power as opposed to de facto unofficial inequities, right? And so that's where we jump into second wave feminism, a period of feminist activity that began in the early 1960s, lasted roughly 2 decades. It took place throughout the Western world and aimed to increase equality for women by building on previous feminist gains. Now, a thing to keep in mind, though, is that a lot of these same suffragettes were also in favor of prohibition. Not so great. And, for obvious reasons, I don't think that needs to be stated, but we're going to get into that a little bit later when it comes to the further tiers. But yeah, so let's jump back to Grinnell here. Um, Most scholars place the second wave of feminism between the 60s and the 80s. As men returned home from World War II, they joined the workforce again. The women had filled the positions, found themselves without work. Bad deal. Forced to return to the household. So they were good. So women were good enough for the workplace while the men were out fighting and whatnot. But whenever they come back, it's literally back to the kitchen with you, right? That, and that's a little bit different than the right to vote. So it's more affecting people at a different level, but it's the same kind of mission, right? Basically empowering women, as it were. So while the first wave feminism focused on enfranchising women, overturning gender inequity in the law, second wave feminism found women seeking equal rights and opportunities for women in their economic activities, their personal lives, their politics. For many women, Betty Friedan's book, The Feminine Mystique, sparked this desire for change. Friedan spoke about the lack of fulfillment and boredom experienced by housewives. As time went on, female empowerment groups such as National Organization for Women arose and fought to bring awareness to women's plight. In this area, women's rights touched on sexuality, family, the workplace, domestic violence, marital rape, and a host of other equalities. In particular, feminists of this era worked to label issues like domestic violence and sexual assault as deviant. They sought to construct stigma around these behaviors, moving them out of the realms of normalcy and acceptability. Interestingly, authority figures also applied the deviant label to feminists during this time. While there was a success in this wave of feminism, it did have significant failures. Mainstream white feminist groups often left black women out of the fight for equality. This racial discrimination was explained away by white women saying that gender should be the focus first and race second. This left many black women organizations without the majority support due to their race, and they found little support from black men due to their gender. Collins described this phenomenon with the term outsider within, claiming that black women can hold membership in neither black social thought nor feminist thought, as both assume maleness or whiteness respectively. However, Collins argued that black women then occupied a unique and valuable vantage point from which they can offer meaningful and useful perspectives to both movements. Okay, and so that brings us to third wave feminism. Third wave feminism emerged in the early 1990s, initially as the response to this, right? Initially as a response to sexual harassment allegations made against Clarence Thomas, imagine that, during his Senate nomination hearings by former colleague Anita Hill. Global 2010 is the reference here. Driven by outrage and anger over Thomas's confirmation, young women activists began to form the third wave. This new wave sought to emphasize female power, intersectionality, and change on the personal level. Dicker and Piepmeyer characterized third wave feminists as a movement that contains elements of second wave critique of beauty culture, sexual abuse, and power structures, while it also acknowledges and makes use of the pleasure, danger, and defining power of those structures. Studying third wave feminism can help deepen understanding of subculture as a space to rework, disturb, and sometimes paradoxically uphold structures of power. So the iteration of the feminist movement began in the 90s, grounded in the civil rights advances of second wave, Gen X, early Gen Y generations. Third wave feminists born in the 60s and 70s embraced diversity, individualism in women, and sought to redefine what it meant to be a feminist. Third wave saw the emergence of new feminist currents and theories such as intersectionality, sex positivity, vegetarian ecofeminism, transfeminism, and postmodern feminism. According to feminist scholar Elizabeth Evans, the confusion surrounding what constitutes third wave feminism is in some respects its defining feature. Um, and one of those proponents is, well, we'll get to that. The third wave is traced to the emergence of the Riot Girl feminist punk subculture in Olympia, which I didn't know. I just thought kicked a bunch of ass. I'm just saying, like, what L7 Dickless 7-year bitch, like that stuff was on my, I'm pretty sure I still got a couple of Dickless CDs back, somewhere. Um, so that's fun. To know that played such a huge role in again, I missed the train. I was listening to this stuff. It's just what was happening at the time. But and so that's my ignorance on the topic. But a fun thing to find out, more recently, and to Anita Hill's televised testimony in '91. That Clarence Thomas had sexually harassed her. The third wave is credited to Rebecca Walker, who responded to Thomas's appointment to the Supreme Court in an article in Ms. Magazine, becoming the third wave. She wrote, "So I write this as a plea to all women, especially women of my generation. Let Thomas's confirmation serve to remind you, as it did me, that the fight is far from over. Let this dismissal of a woman's experience move you to anger. Turn that outrage into political power. Do not vote for them unless they work for us. Do not have sex with them. Do not break bread with them. Do not nurture them if they don't prioritize our freedom to control our bodies and our lives. I am not a post-feminist. I'm the third wave." Damn, right? So criticisms, lack of cohesion. An issue raised by critics was because of the absence of a single cause for third wave feminism. The first wave fought for and gained the right to vote. Second wave fought for women to have access to the workforce and bank accounts and da da da. The third wave allegedly lacked a cohesive goal and was often seen as an extension of the second wave. Some argued that the third wave could be dubbed the second wave part 2 when it came to the politics of feminism, and that only young feminist culture was truly third wave. One argument ran that the equation of third wave feminists with individualism prevented the movement from growing and moving towards political goals. Objection to wave construct. Feminist scholars Shira Tarrant objected to the wave construct because it ignored important progress between the periods. Furthermore, feminism is a global movement. She argued the fact that the first, second, and third waves time periods correspond mostly to American feminist developments. It's an interesting point. Third wave feminists proclaim themselves as the most inclusive wave of feminism. Critics have noted that while progressive, there is still exclusion of women of color. Black feminists argue that women's rights movements were not uniquely for the liberation of blacks or black women. Rather, efforts such as women's suffrage and abolition of slavery ultimately uplifted, strengthened, and benefited white society and white women. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Rachel Cargill would have some things to say about that as well. Flavia Jordan, which if you follow me on Twitter, you've seen my tweets with that regard. So then that ultimately leads us to fourth wave feminism, right? Fourth wave feminism is the most recent wave of feminism, born around 2012. It's not recognized by all scholars as its own separate wave, and we're going to find out why. Some have suggested the fourth wave was born through the internet. Large parts of fourth wave feminism include movements like #MeToo, #Free the Nipple, and End Rape on Campus. Much of fourth wave feminism centers itself around dismantling rape culture. While there are no subcultures have emerged during fourth wave feminism, many of the fourth wave movements have subcultural aspects to them. Online jargon and the use of hashtags have become a large part of fourth wave feminism. Words like mansplaining and manspreading were also born during the fourth wave. Publications like feministing.com and Bitch Magazine, which feature feminist content written by young women, build off of a lot of the works of third wave feminism and Riot Girl. These publications continue traditions of reclaiming misogynistic slurs and using print media to spread the ideas of young women. Additionally, hardcore bands like War on Women and hip-hop artists like Cardi B promote fourth wave feminist values in their work. It's characterized by the empowerment of women, the use of internet tools, and intersectionality, which is, to me, fucking huge when it comes to it. The fourth wave, and we'll get to that. The fourth wave seeks greater gender equality by focusing on gendered norms and the marginalization of women in society. Fourth wave feminism became a movement for women to speak up and share their experiences online about sexual abuse, sexual harassment, sexual violence, the objectification of women, and sexism in the workplace. The internet gave women the opportunity for their voices to be heard around the world in a matter of seconds. Social media offered women the opportunity to speak freely about sensitive topics on their own time and their own terms. As women all over the world began sharing their personal stories, they realized the magnitude of problems. So the fourth wave emphasizes intersectionality and interlocking systems of power and how these contribute to social stratification of traditionally marginalized groups. And this is the part that this is the bread and fucking butter here, folks. This is what we're actually here to talk about. The fourth wave emphasizes intersectionality, the interlocking systems of power, and how these contribute to social stratification of traditionally marginalized groups, such as people of color and trans people. Fourth wave feminists advocate, like earlier feminists, for greater representation of these groups in politics and business, and argue that society would be more equitable if policies and practices incorporated the perspectives of all people. So what the fuck does all that mean? Right? I can already tell that I'm losing folks, and that's perfectly fine. So intersectionality. British professor of marketing and consumer research Pauline McLaren argues that although celebrities are at the forefront of the fourth wave feminism, ready access to information has enabled the movement to draw greater attention to economic inequalities faced by women than heretofore possible. Regardless, as more inclusive of the LGBTQIA plus community, fourth wave feminists such as Jacob Bucha of Baker University, probably mispronounced that, I'm assuming is American, have protested stereotypes surrounding men's supposed uncontrolled sexual desire and objectification of women. He states that gay men specifically are stigmatized by such stereotypes because they lie outside of the typical standard for masculinity. And we're definitely going to get to that, because that's where this shit starts to turn really, really fucking ugly. Because the whole purpose, it seems, of fourth wave feminism is to be super inclusive, not just to women of color, but also to the entirety of the queer community, and to the entirety, extending that intersectionality to people of color. Because let's face it, folks, what are we talking about when we talk about the patriarchy if we aren't talking about the great big elephant in the room, and that is traditional racism and the bigotry surrounding that? Grinnell's Subcultures and Sociology course also includes a bit about, let me see if I can pull this up here, a history of radfems. And radfems is short for radical feminists, right? Sounds good. Like feminism itself is a radical movement, right? Radfems. Sounds radical, bro. If you will. So radfems are a contemporary group of feminists who are defined by their work creating inclusive communities for women and explicitly against creating inclusive spaces for trans folks. What? Wait, what? To understand this group, it is imperative to contextualize radical feminism and provide the framework which sets up the stage for this movement. The dominant themes of radical feminism concentrate on sexuality, control, and violence, often dealing with multiple themes at the same time. This movement became popular in the 1960s, early 70s, and resulted from ideas of how to change the patriarchal system. Okay, this sounds good. Okay. Groups of women created women's clubs, which hosted consciousness-raising sessions, meetings dedicated to commiserating in the frustration of their daily life and sharing stories of oppression. Radical feminists knew that in our society, men have more institutional power. Okay. To combat this power, these women began to disrupt society through direct action that displayed their rejection of societal norms and published manifestos that spread their ideas. One of the most famous acts of societal defiance associated with radical feminists was the supposed bra burnings at the 1968 Miss America pageant. Even several decades later, this event, along with the Scum Manifesto and the Red Stockings Manifesto, created a persevering stereotype of women and angry feminists. Well, they should have a right to be angry, right? I mean, it's, this is what we're talking about here. The Red Stockings Manifesto, a defining radfem manuscript, outlines the radical feminists' accepted beliefs. All men have oppressed women, and all men receive social, economic, and political benefits directly from that oppression. Additionally, this manifesto delineates that the belief that male supremacy is the origin for all forms of exploitation and oppression. Most radfems believe in the common themes of liberation from systemic oppression, biological essentialism, and revolution against a ruling structure. Okay, so I mean that all sounds pretty good, right? Especially to normies. Normies be like, "Oh, fuck yeah, bro." All about it. I mean, let me read that again. Most radfems believe in the common themes of liberation from systemic oppression. That sounds pretty fucking intersectional to me. Biological essentialism. Okay, so women aren't broodmares. This is, this is good, right? And revolution against the ruling structure. Fuck yeah, smash the patriarchy, right? Okay. Combining those core ideologies, their ultimate goal is to demolish power structures and in-state internal systems of democracy. Perfect. That sounds very fucking intersectional to me. But what the fuck do I know, right? Sharply contrasting with radical feminists looking into liberal feminism provides an opportunity to investigate differentiating ideologies. Its main tenets are rational thinking, a strong belief of freedom of choice, meritocracy, and access to equal opportunity. Many scholars and activists criticize liberal feminism for heavily focusing on white upper class women. Ooh, okay. That sounds like that second wave thing we was talking about a second ago. However, its strategies have obtained many major accomplishments over the years, winning equal voting rights for the female gender and the right to higher education and many reproductive rights. Hashtag winning, right? An example of contemporary feminists who tackle these topics is Bell Hooks, a 21st century author who wrote the book Feminism is for Everybody. This sounds even fucking perfect, right? In it, she states that, simply put, feminism is a movement to end sexism, sex exploitation, and oppression. A statement that exemplifies liberal feminist ideology. Okay, well, I mean, that sounds good. That sounds good. That sounds like some of the same criticisms with regard to, what do they call it? The boba liberals, right? We are a very large community, and therefore we have lots of different needs, and those of us who, you know, live around lots of white people and want welfare, sometimes we get labeled weird shit by those who don't want the welfare for workers and all that solidarity type of shit, and that's they can get fucked. Um, hey, I'm Asian, I can say that, so fuck you if you don't like it. And we're gonna get into that real shortly here. Contemporary radical feminists, a summary of radfems. Contemporary radical feminists maintain that all women share a collective marginalized identity of systemically oppressed women. Common sociological solutions suggested by radical feminists in the 60s aim to rid social norms of a nuclear family dynamic, separating the ties between reproduction and women's body through artificial reproduction and female revolution to liberate women from socialized self-hatred. In an open letter written to the public, a mass collection of contemporary radfems addressed the rise of present-day gender theory, defining their persecution as the idea that biological women are oppressed and exploited as a class by men and by capitalists due to their reproductive capacity. This definition outlines that radical feminists see some of my audience is already like, what? But the rest, I'm gonna just as a cis male, I'm gonna just say the rest of us are like fucking not missing a beat here so far. So my apologies, but we're just playing devil's advocate here. This definition outlines that radical feminists see reproductive, and for the folks who don't get it yet, you just wait. The definition outlines that radical feminists see reproductive capacity as a requirement for women to suffer under male oppression. By using reproductive ability and the term biological women, radical feminists claim as a trans exclusionary title. What? What? That don't sound very intersectional. I keep reading. Continuing on in the open letter, these women assert that trans identities undercut the social and political goals of radical feminism as they reinforce the cultural, economic, and political tracking of gender rather than challenging it. Forbidden Discourse, The Silencing of Feminist Criticism of Gender, 2013, as the reference. By reinforcing gender essentialism and biological determinism, radical feminists believe that they are fighting against patriarchal oppression. A transgender man may be allowed to exit situations of gendered oppression by passing as a male instead of being forced to confront the direct persecution that radfems vehemently oppose. Additionally, radfems also display the idea that by passing as women, transgender women are able to depart from the guilt and responsibility of being part of the oppressors. Many lesbian radfems believe that trans folks who do not immediately disclose their personal identity are supposedly deceiving others. Moreover, if trans women do not disclose their transgender identity before becoming intimate, especially with a lesbian radfem, it's believed that they are attempting to undermine the identity of lesbianism. In this way, radfems question trans politics and criticize trans inclusionary measures. Fuck. Globally, radical feminism takes focuses on sex trafficking and believes that it functions within an internalized capitalist system. A rise in the visibility of the trans community also comes with backlash saturated with discrimination, most notably centered from the radical feminist movement. Criticism of radical feminism include an inattention to race and elitist views toward trans women, which is where the term TERF, trans exclusionary radical feminist, was born. Contemporary radical feminists share a group mentality, centered around the belief that trans women are not real women, supporting the bathroom bill, a bill that restricts multi-user restrooms and sex-segregated facilities on the basis of sex assigned at birth, and believe that trans people should be barred from accessing women-only spaces, such as rape crisis centers or women's shelters. More on that in a second. Radfems will intentionally use trans folks' dead names, will use incorrect pronouns, and willfully reject the notion that gender identities can change. While not all TERFs hold the same belief, all identify as feminists, while simultaneously gatekeeping and maintaining an exclusive cisgender, women-only community. Many TERFs identify as radfems or gender-critical feminists, which speaks to their belief in gender essentialism, as mentioned above. The community of radfems is almost entirely, so apparently I did not understand what gender essentialism means at all. This community of radfems is almost entirely comprised of white, middle-class, cisgendered women. Many gender-critical feminists also identify as lesbian, dispelling previous ideas that only heterosexual women were maintaining these beliefs. While radical feminists accept the label of trans-exclusionary, they perceive the term TERF as a slur, although a small group proudly claim the identity online. And we'll get to that article in just a second. Many people associate trans-exclusionary radical feminists with SWERFs, sex worker exclusionary radical feminism. This seems to harken back to some of the not so great points about the first wave of feminism, the prohibition, the anti sex worker type of stuff. Another subgroup of feminism which opposes women's participation in pornography and prostitution. What happened to liberation? Yo. The ideology of both groups overlap in the demanding prescriptive approach to feminism. These feminists use techniques like doxing, oh great, revealing personal identification information out to out a trans person, picketing and trolling to abuse trans folks, disrupt queer parades, disrupt their social political beliefs due to the lack of intersectionality and their affinity for gender essentialism. Many feminists have labeled TERFs as an anti-feminist group, and I wonder fucking why. Recently at the 2018 Pride Parade in London, a group of TERFs lay down in front of the parade and refused to move until they were allowed to leave the parade. Or lead the parade, rather. Many carried signs announcing trans activism erases lesbians and that the trans movement is anti-lesbian, as explained by their strict adherence to biological determinism. Oh, what? Wow. That's what? All right. So before we get into that article by Sheila Jeffries, TERF isn't just a slur. It's hate speech. Yeah, that's a real title. By and we'll get into Sheila Jeffries here in just a second. Um, this actually kind of somewhat reminds me of an experience that I had that I have mentioned maybe once in the past with regard to transphobes and transphobes doxing folks in the queer community and radical feminists being perfectly fine with that. You know, in fact, taking several minutes out of a day to explain to me why it's not my place to say anything about this, even though I was physically present at the Pride event that they were announcing to the clan or whoever the fuck it is. But apparently, and unfortunately, I did edit it first, fall for this bullshit because again, it sounded good. It sounded good for the sake of intersectionality. I'm not a woman. I'm not a trans person. I don't, maybe it's not my place to speak on things that aren't in my community, but you know, with all the shootings that we've had, at that particular time of the year, would it have been my business if one of these, ultra MAGA assholes showed up at this Pride Fest and, starts mowing down kids or mowing down, folks who were there just for a Pride Fest or mowing me the fuck down or my friends in the queer community who fucking brought their family, their husbands and wives and kids and whoever's to this is any of that fucking my business? I guess not. For the sake of the feelings of, we just say what it is, folks. It's TERFs hurts feelings. You know, the last thing a motherfucker wants to do is tell Chainsaw I don't know nothing about nothing, because I'm gonna go ahead and research the shit and I'm gonna share it with the community, because there's a lot of other people who didn't know about all this stuff either. But I hope we all have a chance to figure this out together. Um, so Sheila Jeffries, she's a former professor of political science at the University of Melbourne. Born in England, she's a lesbian feminist scholar. She analyzes the history and politics of human sexuality. Jeffries' argument that the sexual revolution on men's terms contributed less to women's freedom than to their own continued oppression has both commanded respect and attracted intense criticism. I mean, this shit sounds good. It sounds really perfectly fucking good. She argues that women suffering pain in pursuit of beauty is a form of submission to patriarchal sadism. Okay. That transgender people reproduce oppressive gender roles and mutilate their bodies through sex reassignment surgery. This doesn't sound so good. And that lesbian culture has been negatively affected by emulating the sexist influence of the gay male subculture of dominant submissive sexuality. Where the fuck you get off with this shit? See, we see this. We see this when it comes to ethnic minorities. We see this when it comes to, you know, black folks versus Asian folks. We see that, animosity and whatnot. And it's trash. It's absolute trash. Marginalized people, we're all on the same team here. This whole blacks and Asians thing, with that resembles this shit is garbage, and anybody who's all for it, they can go fuck themselves. So I guess in that same regard, even though I'm not involved in this part of the community, it looks really familiar to me, and those people also should go fuck themselves. I guess, but anyway, I'll let you folks decide. Let's take a look at the article here. Because again, these are just I don't want to throw too much of my opinions on this. I'll tell you where I'm coming from, and then I'll let you folks decide here, because I know this is a touchy subject for some, but bigotry bigotry can come from within, just as well as it can come from without. Okay. Um, and believe me, we'll get to that. So feministcurrent.com. This is an article from 2017. Granted, TERF isn't just a slur; it's hate speech. Now, starts out with some mean tweets, and they're perforated throughout this article, but I'll try and make it quick. Last week, a 60-year-old woman was beaten up at Speaker's Corner, and not to say that some of this stuff that we're going to go over isn't like just fucking devastatingly disgusting, because it is. And I'll even read some of these mean fucking tweets. I could see why a person would go this route, but Jesus Christ, folks, what the fuck? There's uglier things than this, and I'll get into that in a second. Last week, a 60-year-old woman was beaten up at Speaker's Corner by several men. She was there with a group of women who had chosen the historic corner of Hyde Park as a meeting place before heading off to a talk called What is Gender? The men who punched and kicked Maria McLaughlin had come to protest the women on account of their interest in feminism and in discussing the way new conversations and legislation around gender identity could impact the women's movement and women's rights. The protesters did not frame their anger and inflammatory rhetoric in this way, though. Instead, they labeled the women TERFs, a word that has come to signify a modern witch, to be silenced, threatened, harassed, punched, and yes, killed. The idea that feminists who question the notion of gender identity should be beaten and murdered has very rapidly become accepted by self-described leftists. We're not just talking about Twitter eggs here, even though this is perforated with mean tweets, and they are mean. I mean, holy fuck. Men with large platforms who are publicly associated with Antifa and groups like Democratic Socialists of America have amplified the punch TERFs and TERFs get the guillotine message proudly with the support of their comrades. In reference to The Handmaid's Tale, many have taken to saying TERFs get the wall. And then here's the mean tweets. TERFs get the wall, TERFs get the wall. The comparison is surprisingly and frighteningly truthful admission in terms of intent of these men. The wall in The Handmaid's Tale, if you haven't seen it already or read the book, is where executed bodies are hung, often with placards around their necks that read gender treachery. The dead bodies serve as warnings to others: do not rebel, do not fight back, do not reject the patriarchal order of things. And this is precisely what these men use the term TERF are saying to women: obey our rule or you will be punished. And keep in mind, the patriarchal order of things that they're discussing is the inclusion of trans women as women. I mean, let's just be fucking completely real while we read this absolute trash. Okay, I might throw in some opinions here and there. Let's be real while we read this fucking garbage. The patriarchal order of things is this new system where we have decided that, well, bigotry is wrong and trans women exist. Therefore, trans women are women. And these don't want to be called TERFs because TERF is hate speech. Folks are mad about that because that's the patriarchy invading women's safe spaces. All right. Rather than condemning the violence at Speaker's Corner, numerous trans activists and self-identified leftist men have celebrated and encouraged it. And again, not really what I would be tweeting, and certainly not a big fan of violence, even though I have come across several folks that don't identify themselves as being trans exclusionary, but also have no problem at all with excluding trans people when it comes to certain things. Also seem to have significantly more interest in violence than I do. But anyway, imagine if 20 people had punched TERFs. Imagine if every TERF had left bruises and bloodied. Everyone would stop organizing. I heard a TERF got punched, so it's my duty as commander of Armchair Violence Enthusiast Twitter to say good job, nice work, keep it up. And it just goes on from there, and it's, I'm not going to lie, again, these are pretty fucking disgusting tweets, but at the same time, mean tweets kind of reminds me of some of the shit that J.K. Rowling, I can't help but think that like J.K. Rowling, and if you haven't seen that yet, in some of her new literary pieces is Robert Galbraith, or Galbraith, or whoever the fucking break, that's worth a shot, because she literally wrote an entire fucking book that's just riddled with mean tweets that very much reads like this. She might have wrote this article. I don't know. This could all be fake. While some will claim the word TERF is neutral, its use demonstrates the opposite. It's not a word that women have claimed for themselves, like slut, cunt, or bitch. TERF is a word imposed on women to shut them up, bully them, condemn them, smear them, humiliate them, and dismiss them, You literally, the sole focus is to say that trans women aren't women. Humiliate them? You wrote this whole fucking article. Okay. But more than that, it's a threat. If I think about the times in my life I've been called these words by a man, I've almost always felt the threat of violence behind them. The spitting rage behind those words, the desire to follow through with a punch, is too often present. I've always known these words are used against me as an explicit reminder you are subordinate. No matter how confident, tough, self assured, strong, or brave a woman is, these words still put her in her place. The term TERF is itself an intentional manipulation intended to reframe feminist ideas and activism as exclusionary, rather than foundational to women's liberation movement. In other words, it is an attack on women-centered political organizing and the basic theory that underpins feminist analysis of patriarchy. Okay, like all those other things that she's referencing here, those are things that women get called, and that holds true. TERF is not one of those things. That's a thing where you just decided that you were going to be an anti-trans bigot, and people are calling you out on that. Yeah, some of these fucking douchebags are, violent assholes, and they're actually violent, or they're just, armchair warriors calling for violence and just showing their fucking bullshit off. But you are expressing your desire for vitriol, and you are mad, sad, hurt feelings that you're getting it back in kind. Fucking poor fucking you. Jesus Christ. I mean, I don't even think I have to go into the statistics of suicides by trans kids, trans teenagers, and just trans people in their early 20s. Trans people in general, compared to other folks. Jesus Christ. This is the equivalent to mansplaining, if you will. Holy shit! And I'm mansplaining about mansplaining, so I don't know. There's a lot of inception going on there, which is funny in its own route, because of TERFs. So, for example, those who call us TERF are labeled as such for numerous crimes, including understanding that women are members of an oppressed class of people, a sex, class, or caste, as feminists like Kate Millett and Sheila Jeffries have called it, challenging the notion of innate internal gender, having conversations about gender identity, questioning whether or not children should begin the process of transitioning, associating with or defending women who have been labeled TERF, understanding that the root of women's oppression and male supremacy is in biological sex, understanding that gender is imposed and is oppressive exists to create a hierarchy between men and women, questioning dogma and mantras like trans women are women, supporting women-only space, disputing an ideology that claims male and female are not material reality. These things are not only criminal, or these things are not only not criminal, but are the root of feminism. In other words, in order to understand, right, and it's not criminal to be a fucking bigot either. You know, I don't come, I wasn't born from a man, for fuck's sake. My mother is also Japanese, and my grandmother was also Japanese, and both of her parents were also Japanese. Racism. How the fuck am I trying to explain racism to well, you people who probably already fucking get it? If you're still here listening to this shit, you fucking get it. It's the ones who clicked off that I'm concerned with. Holy shit. Holy shit. This is why third wave feminism exists, for that white only spaces. Remember we talked about that a second ago? The white only spaces for only liberation of women, but really it only meant white women. This is why third wave feminism worked itself out to be inclusive to women of color, and also to those any and all same lesbians that were mentioned here, queer people in general. There should not be a need for this kind of push within a fourth wave of feminism, because it should have already been under wraps by the third wave. But maybe your boy Chainsaw just doesn't understand how all this stuff works, and his calculator's broken. You must understand that the women are not inherently feminine and that men are not inherently masculine. You must be willing to have critical conversations and ask challenging questions about the status quo, about dominant ideology, about political discourse. You must understand that patriarchy began as a means to control women's reproductive capacity, and that therefore women's biology is very much central to their status as less than. You must understand that feminism is a woman-centered movement and that women have the right to meet and organize amongst themselves without members of the oppressor class, men, to advocate toward their own liberation. See, this is where it becomes a big pile of dog shit because nobody is arguing against, how did they put it, the status quo, the dominant ideology, political discourse, that patriarchy began as a means to control women's reproductive capacity. So where, and nobody's arguing against that. It's just that where does that leave trans and non-binary people? Because non-binary people also can have a uterus, and trans men also can have a uterus. So where does that leave these folks? Well, apparently it leaves them to get shit on by anybody who doesn't want to not shit on them just for the sake of fucking existing. And I guess that's the modern take on the TERF, or the, I don't even know if it's, at this point while I'm making this, I'm not even sure if the phrase radical feminist is equivalent to what I've come to believe the shortened phrase radfem means. Let me know in the comments if you know more than your boy Chainsaw, because it seemed I would assume there's a difference, but I feel like there's not a difference. But I feel like at the same time, as soon as I say that folks are gonna be like, nah, that's not the thing. Like it's totally, they're two different things, and there's these ones that is turfy, there's these ones that is swerfy, and there's these ones that like actually think that everybody who's in a marginalized, portion of the community should probably not get dog shit on by other people in the marginalized communities. And I don't know, it's a thing. But anyway, this pile of dog shit just goes on from there, and we might at least leave that one at that. So what brought this whole conversation on? And this is going to be the part where I'm going to leave you, the viewer, to kind of take a look at this. So I noticed there was something going on, and I don't want to get too into detail about it because really I'm not even kind of sure like what the whole conversation sparked from. Because one of the users who had started the conversation, I'm assuming, got their shit deleted off of Twitter because they were just some sort of a fucking psycho ass bastard. That being said, I want to show you a string of some of these comments here that really kind of pointed me in the direction of maybe why I feel like if there is a difference between radical feminism and these coined term rad femmes, that there doesn't seem to be much. There seems to be a lot of overlap between these rad femmes and TERFs, and apparently swerfs. I don't know. I'll let you folks decide. I'll just show this to you and maybe give my 3 cents at the end here. So here's a mean tweet. Well, not a mean tweet, but a tweet that I caught here. Quote, all men are a threat to me, is a white feminist talking point that has historically gotten children of color unalived for white women, and I will be glad as fuck when it finally leaves queer discourse. Stop seeing men as a category of people who deserve abuse and ostracizing. An NB named Chaos. Okay, well. Sure, there's a certain group of folks that are going to be all pissed off about that. So that was quote tweeted here. When my mom left my father, she first took us to a battered women's shelter. However, I was 7 years old. We were told when I turned 8, I would constitute an inherent threat as a man, and either I would have to fend for myself on the streets or our family would have to leave. I don't know how much of this shit is true. People just shitpost on Twitter all the time. That was quote tweeted. A few years ago, I was on a board of a DFV service that refused boys 12 and over, and it was a massive fight to overturn that incredible. There was a massive fight to overturn that, and incredible to me that other board members and staff still thought refusing safety to a mom with a son was okay. And that was quote tweeted here by one user. This is ridiculous. 12 and over is a teen, a boy very capable and often engaging in sexually abusive behavior. That's a hard no, and this woman should have been kicked off the board for endangering women and young girls. Why are women like this? Why are women like this? XY's rape girls. Stop the bullshit. Holy fuck. Thoughts, opinions? I don't know. That seemed like a lot. I'm not actually gonna read this one. I'm gonna just let y'all read it to yourselves. Yeah. Um. Okay, fuck it. I'll read it. So the retweet from themselves. How the hell do these creatures come out of our coochies? It says a whole lot about us. How the fuck a N-word slur came out of your coochie, sis? That's crazy. Only poisonous coochie can breed an XY. I swear by it. Um, what? I'm not a science nerd, but like, what? Um, I remember being look. These are public, so like, I feel no, whatever, letting this shit out there. So if you have a problem with all of that, I don't know. This shit's public, and I don't. My Twitter game sucks, so we'll leave it at that. I remember being sexually terrorized by boys and men my whole life. Even little toddlers constantly trying to look up a girl's/woman's skirt. They didn't do this with males. Little boys are not innocent. Wanting to believe they are puts girls in harmful situations, eyes wide open. And I'm assuming it was a quote tweet from the user that initially had their Twitter account suspended for, I guess, saying some crazy ass shit that was worse than this. Little boys cannot go to women's shelters if their mums won't accept that. She doesn't need to be there. There's way too many women that need this kind of support for us to worry about that woman harboring a son that'll soon be another woman's abuser. Little boys rape too, for fuck's sake. Um, Young boys are degenerates beyond any help. I wouldn't even oppose them getting their ass by a grown man or by grown men. They deserve that. They deserve that. If it wasn't for the risk that other grown ass men would also start to advocate for pedophilia on girls, I can't care less about boys. So then another user writes, you might have forgotten this part. Young boys are degenerates beyond help. Okay, we saw that. And then the response, you saying this even as a joke, because it might be shit posting, who knows? And it might still be shit posting, who knows? You saying this even as a joke, which it appears to be, says a lot more about you than it says about any of the people you're arguing with. The user responds, I'm being serious. Boys can get their ass. They didn't edit that part out. They even seem to enjoy it and actively ask for it. Don't pretend they're innocent. And it just, it goes on. It goes on from there. Just getting weird. Super, super weird. So, so yeah. What the fuck is that? It, again, it might just be shit posting. People jump on Twitter and say crazy rando things, but that feels like that can't, why would somebody feel that that would be a thing to say, and so many folks jumping on and supporting this? Is it just a bunch of shit posters? Or I mean, we already know that there are actually people out there advocating for and writing articles in online journals like Feminist Current, talking about crazy trans exclusionary turfness and whatever, and talking about turf as a slur. Turf is a slur. This sounds like Karen is a slur kind of thing. Again, it's white people's problems, and I actually said something similar to that, which got me a whole shit ton of slack more recently than my last interaction with turfs. So someone somewhere else on social media, I'm not gonna go into names because I know some of these people involved in this conversation, but it was an interesting conversation that I'd seen and that I saw and was witness to that grabbed my attention and actually didn't come to fruition, or at least some of my comments didn't come to fruition until probably about 20 minutes before I sat here and hit that record button. So that's pretty neat. Someone had posted a meme making reference to the difficulties that they may or may not struggle with. Just in general, calling folks dude. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting because I also have, you know, kind of made it a customary thing just to refer to folks as bro or bruh or whatever. It just, in my younger years, just carried over. It's just, call it an Asian thing. I don't know. Just it was a thing, right? And apparently the other side of that also is just calling everyone, dude. Hey, what's up, dude? Hey, dude, what you doing, dude? Whatever. So the meme makes reference to their, you know, initial want to, or just the general non-thinking part of their brain wanting to refer to everyone as dude, and then wonderful trans and non-binary folks who may be offended by that. And I thought, okay, well, this seems like it could be a shitstorm, right? So delved into the comments, and I was not disappointed by some of what I saw. Of course, all of the I don't even know how the some of the weirdo MAGA righties. I guess they ain't even MAGA righties. They're just shitbags. Jumped in a conversation and gave their 2 cents worth. But there were a couple of them that caught me as interesting because some folks who I know who may even watch this show who are very with it when it comes to not being a bigot and not being a complete shitbag, or at least that I have seen, haven't shown me anything that would indicate that they're a shitbag. And don't get me wrong, there are some people that I found that I thought were that I trusted to be very in tune with. I'm gonna just stop wearing collared shirts. There's some folks that I've come across, even recently this year, who I thought were very in tune with this sort of thing, who seemed very, very socially liberal, who it turns out are not very socially liberal and are missing the fucking point and are more than willing to fall back into their bigotry, transphobia, and racism at the drop of a hat. And I'll get into that in just a second. But this one person in particular, who I still have no reason to believe is in any way transphobic, made the comment and the point of, hey, you know I've always used the phrase dude or the word dude as gender neutral, and obviously there was pushback by folks, and I'm thinking to myself, and this is just me being honest, I've literally before this never heard anyone, in the, I did have one person ever in my life, one person in the queer community who told me, like, maybe a year, 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, whatever, that don't call me bro. It's, I don't like that. And me, like, so I'm like, all right, that's cool. Sorry about that. No big deal. I wasn't thinking, didn't know. Obviously, that's what spurred this whole fucking conversation, right? Um, so this person, responds out, hey, I always consider it gender neutral. And then someone else responded, of course, with um, you fuck dudes, and they responded, well, the old English use of the word man to mean man and woman. To specify a gender, you put a prefix to man, as in woman or vierman. There's no real difference in calling everybody dude. It's an interesting take. I don't know that I would have went that route with it. Third person, for plural of people, and we'll get to that in a second. Again, this is all just cis people talking to each other. Some may be members of the queer community, but so far that I've seen, thus far anyway, are all folks who otherwise seem to indicate, and at least I haven't went through the list and fucking asked them, but I'll tell you why I shouldn't fucking have to in a second. For the same reason that I don't just expect folks to just assume that I'm Asian without me telling you. You might seem, now don't get me wrong, there's elements of the clan that can just see through this shit. And most of them misidentify me as being Hispanic, especially when I got this shit going on. But, clean shave with a short white man's haircut, like, you might not know the difference. So I'm not going to be pissed off. Is it racist every time a white person mislabels me as Caucasian? No, and that's fucking stupid to assume otherwise. There's some things that I will give to other communities that aren't my own. That's not one of them. If I make a mistake, you can correct me. I'll try not to make that mistake in the future, especially if it's one like this that I never even, thought of, never even came to mind. And, it just never came up. No one had ever, mentioned it to me before. Just hadn't come up in conversation. So, yeah, and we'll get to that in a second too. So, a little pushback there, making that reference. So the other person comes out. So you say, I fuck dudes. And if a guy said, I fuck dudes, you wouldn't assume he meant men. You're being disingenuous. The other person says your answer lies in the context. Stop being so literal. And is the other person being facetious or just contrarian? I don't know, but it's an interesting point. It lies in context. Maybe he never heard this before either, this person. The response, stop being so obtuse. You say dude isn't a gendered term. If that were the case, then I fuck dudes wouldn't mean men. It does. And then the mob jumps on and, this, that, and the other thing. It's totally cool to call everyone dude. It's totally not cool to call everyone dude. And it just goes and scrolls on from there. So, after seeing all this wildness from folks who, again, there might be folks now in the conversation who are trans or non-binary. I have no idea. Wasn't apparent to me at the time, so I did not assume so or otherwise. But I did make my comments that the only people that I've come across with a problem with the general common noun usage of dudes, none of them thus far have referenced themselves as trans or NB. Or refer to a group of people, are the same folks disregarding the non-European portions of the Silk Road trade route, entirety of global colonialism and the international slave trade, doing so around this time of year for the specific purpose of supporting the cultural appropriation of a specific range of tasty food commodities for the sake of non-white male portion of the patriarchy to not be all up in their fifis. Ask black women about Karen's place in the patriarchy for a reference, and I think we just discussed a whole bunch of that. The folks seem to overlap the larger group that disregards the existence of Asian people in the binary race conversation as well. Meanwhile, we sit on the sidelines, curious about where and when our communal concerns and differences will have an opportunity to be considered. I hold trans people and non-binary folks the same standard that white passing people of color are held to as a standard default. If you ask us, we'll tell you. To expect more than that sounds like white people problems, and we're all kind of done with that. And again, with all of this going on, this is what I had in mind whenever I had also messaged out between the MAGA fascists and the second wave, feminists, rad femmes, if you will, the hardcore TERFs in this case. I may have mislabeled second wave feminists, so we'll try and make that correction in the future, specifically to rad femmes or TERFs, until I can find out if radical feminists, if there is a subgroup of that only falls into this other group. Otherwise, just for the sake of safety and for the sake of not offending anyone who might misconstrue that, because again, I could see how that might be misconstrued. I've made reference to white only feminism to white women who have come back at me and been like, well, I'm white and I feel that I'm a feminist. And I'm like, well, that's a little bit different than, TERFs calling, making reference to what is a real woman versus, all this other fucking bigoted ass bullshit. There's a difference. And in this case, until I'm able to identify a difference, I'll take that precaution. That's fair. But anyway, some of these folks who masquerade as allies, because that is very much a thing. I know a lot of folks who I have been able to identify as very much not trans friendly. When push comes to shove, their intersectionality stops right about here, and who identify as being very trans friendly. Who masquerade as allies, all queer people and people of color in the the communities I've been into, or in my community, have much more pressing and dire health issues that we have to deal with and be concerned with, at least for now, than megalithic cultural accidents stemming from, norms passed down from before we were considered people by anyone, let alone by some. Good energy, but let's use it to do something. And, I stood by that. I would say I stand by that, but I was actually corrected before I made this. So that's pretty fun to let you know that your boy Chainsaw turned out I was wrong. And that's totally cool. That's the whole fucking point. I'd never come across anybody within this community who ever fucking expressed that this was even an issue until literally 20 minutes before I hit that fucking record button. So that's a thing. And it can happen. And when you do, you just don't be an asshole. Definitely best to opt on the side of safety and whatnot. When I saw this, I thought, well, I guess that's a thing that I should probably ask someone. So I went and fucking asked someone and they let me know. Ironically, it came up in a different conversation that they were having, elsewhere. So that's how this shit works, folks. It's real simple. You just ask questions. You don't assume that everybody's, out to get you, that everybody's, a racist and a bigot and a misogynist and this and that and the other fucking thing, unless they prove that they are, unless they show themselves to be, unless they, unless they come out and tell you that, people of color don't matter to them, or these people of color matter to them, but these people of color don't matter to them, or that, trans people don't matter, but this, matters. Cis women matter, trans women don't matter. That when they tell you who they are, what they actually stand for, it'll be when push comes to shove, and they'll let you know. And it usually starts, honestly, from what I could tell. I don't know. It's weird because it seems a little bit different than dealing with the. We'll get into that. It seems a little bit different though, because instead of like the racists, they come out, they're screaming, they're yelling, they're da da da. They want to tell you all about yourself. But the one thing they don't want you to do is respond because they want to scream over you. It seems like these folks, they don't come out with the screaming and yelling first. They want you to be quiet. They don't want you to stand up for trans folks. They don't want you to stand up for non-binary folks. They want you to be quiet. They want you to sit down and shut up. They want you to not speak out on behalf of other marginalized people. They want to dictate what you can and can't say about them. And that's another example. Now I ended up finding it in my infinite wisdom to not actually message this out, but I considered it strongly. And I thought, it's basically just white people problems anyway. These folks are arguing amongst themselves about, cis white people problems. They're arguing about themselves, about what, folks in the trans community, feel about how they're treated and what their problems are and what their biggest concerns are and I don't know. How the fuck are they supposed to know? And until, later did I even see anyone chime in on the conversation. So I'll leave it at that. But I did consider, and I left myself, the notes for commentary. And to make that reference of intersectionality, the monolith comment of the Asian community being a community or not being a community, because we are the largest population on the fucking planet and we're as diverse as the entirety of the rest of the planet, and we can't figure out what we stand for because we stand for so many different things, because we're made up of so many different people. And yet here in America, we're a marginalized community, or a couple of marginalized communities rather, and certainly we're able to find intersectionality between ourselves. See, back in good old Korea, I'm the colonizer, but here in the US, we got to eat at the same table. Back in the day, somebody like me, as long as I get to use this language and not the other one, I get to sit at the front of the bus. And so all of this shit coming from all of these cis white people sounds to me a whole lot like, Japanese folks getting to sit at the front of the bus, as long as we're not talking all that ching chong stuff. That's what it sounds like to me. I'm just saying. But anyway, so I made the reference. When I see white folks white knighting social mistakes based on experience, I can't help but wonder, where are my protectors and how would they exist if I even had any? Because I don't know how they would exist. I don't know how. I'm a white passing Asian man. How would my white knighters even function in a social situation? I don't know how. That would be weird. Like, I don't think there's a way. Should I be offended that folks see this face and don't immediately recognize that I'm a marginalized person. Is that racist? Is every person who mislabels me as white an unsafe racist? Because again, through my comments later, somebody, I have no idea who it was or what that made reference to. Well, these people who are saying that they've never experienced this, that's because your trans friends consider you unsafe, so they wouldn't say that. And I'm thinking to myself, are you got to be fucking out of your fucking tiny little mind? Again, is every person who mislabels me as white, is this white person who's telling me this shit an unsafe person because now they're dictating how an Asian person should communicate and interact with other marginalized people? Why are white people telling me what the fuck I should be doing? Why are white people telling me what I should be saying? Right, so it's not so fucking easy, is it? But also, why, when do I out myself as being an ethnic minority, do white people still seem to feel it's their place to dictate how I interact with marginalized groups? So white people can tell me how to explore other communities now. Is it considered unsafe or racist to not know how to interact with white passing ethnic minorities without asking? Are people who say BIPOC unsafe because they exclude light-skinned Asian people? That's a real question, folks. That's a real fucking question. This feels like the equivalent to letting Japanese people sit at the front of the bus if we speak English, and I'm very loudly not here for that. There are real bigots out there. They seem to have come onto the, and this is true. They did seem to, all the MAGA folks seem to jump in. I don't care about it, trans people. I say what I want. And posting these just fucking transphobic memes, just trash all over it. Um, those are the people that I originally commented with regard to good energy, because I had a feeling that I was not going to be surprised by the comments from some of those folks. And that's, I mean, there's a difference between the accidents that happen through folks with good intentions and the social justice warriors jumping all the fuck over them, and then actual MAGA bigots, or in this case, actual, transphobic bigots who they may not even see as anything but allies until it's, until someone else mentions it or it's too late. Um, and again, also considering that not every Asian person feels the same way that I do, and I can only assume that that extends to folks in, the trans community and non-binary folks as well. Um, that not everybody's going to have the same, feelings about what offends them, what doesn't offend them, what they let slip by, what their morals are, how they do. I mean, you can't even count on just white women to make an opinion, stand in solidarity, an opinion on whether or not trans people are people, or we wouldn't be having this conversation about radfems. And apparently, it's not. I say white women because that's where this whole thing that didn't start to extend to women of color really essentially comes from, is from racism. We talk about the patriarchy. I mean, some would argue that white women are a part of the patriarchy as enablers. I don't love that, but I don't hate that. It makes sense to me. And that'll lead into the conversation real quick, and I want to make it super quick because we are going way over time here. For the bros who say things like, "What's misandry? It's toxic femininity." I don't even think you have to go that far, really. You really don't have to go that far with what a lot of that is. It's it's racism. First of all, you can see that very clearly when it comes to the exclusion of people of color from the conversation. When it comes to the aggro and competitiveness of what, just forget the fact that it's white women over black men, or white women over black women. It's that, I can't even believe that I'm saying this. It's that colonizer class versus, the class that is to be colonized. So you could just simply leave it at racism and call it that. As far as the rest of it, it's just simply uh, misogyny. Um, when it comes to that sort of aggro, because you're still falling into the trap of, and that's why I say there's no such thing as toxic femininity, as it were, to the bros, because when they experience that, it's still just basically toxic masculinity that can be handled by a woman. Look at well, I mean, look at this. Look at TERFs in general attacking trans women and trans you know exclusivity from the gender roles and safe spaces. Some of this goofy shit that I was reading about shelters and whatever. I mean, yeah, some of that may just be Twitter shit posting, but I mean, we saw that in the article in referenced in Grinnell College is talking about it. It's not just Twitter shit posting, folks. This is a larger growing community. They call the United Kingdom of Great Britain, at least the larger island, TERF Island, for a fucking reason. And it's not because it's just shit posting on Twitter. These people have infiltrated the entirety of the Labour Party. Ask J.K. Rowling if it's just shit posting on Twitter, because she'll send her fucking mob after you. So, I don't know, folks. And I guess for the last part, if you're still sticking around this long into the game, what does this have to do with me, the normie? You're saying? Well, so a mutual on Twitter had posted this tweet, and I'll read it to you in a second, but I retweeted it with this bill's sponsor, Bob Onder. His term is up next year. This bill, this November, folks in Missouri Senate District 2 will have a chance to make sure this seat doesn't stay in MAGA hands. I look forward to speaking with Michael Sinclair, who's running for Senate District 2 seat, about many of the issues facing folks here in our state, and of course about Bob Onder's new bill, literally Senate Bill 22. And this initial tweet was posted on the 22nd of September, ironically enough. Here we go again. Missouri just introduced SB 22 in special session. It would medically detransition all teens, revoke doctors' licenses for gender-affirming care, ban trans youth from sports, forcibly teaches forcibly teachers to out trans kids. So it forces teachers to out trans kids. And this is based on surely and undoubtedly based on the same Ohio bill that allows for badge checks for kids who may or may not be trans kids. In order to keep trans girls out of sports, you've got to check, make sure, right? Yeah, that's what we're fucking talking about. And what about when they're wrong? What about when they're wrong? What about when they're wrong? Um, well, I'll tell you about when they're wrong, because I had this conversation recently also about an MMA fighter. Um, so I legit had this conversation recently. Gabby Garcia. Should Gabby Garcia be allowed in women's MMA? Is it a good idea that she's out there? Because she's a trans woman, right? Fighting in the ring with other women. Is this not domestic violence? Is this not a man beating up on a woman every time she gets in the ring? And she's a fucking champion, folks. She kicks a bunch of ass. Um, we'll leave it at that. But should Gabby Garcia be allowed to fight women in MMA? Shouldn't she be in with the men? Well, I had that conversation and I was awestruck. I was absolutely surprised when I looked up a little bit more about Gabby Lemos Garcia. Yes, it's her wiki page. Judgments later. 9-time Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu world champion, 11-time Pan Jiu-Jitsu champion, 4-time ADCC submission fighting world champion, one of the most successful competitors of all time in the female black belt divisions, and a member of the IBJJF Hall of Fame. It was announced she would be retiring in 2021. She was born in Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul, Brazil. Her early and mid teens were spent playing sports, volleyball, team handball, field hockey. At 13, her and her family moved to Sao Paulo. Around this age, Garcia's uncle helped begin a training in jiu-jitsu. She's in her final year of university, taking a course in advertising. And then basically she had just kicked ass since then, right? So I looked a little bit further into it, and it turns out, believe it or not, to a lot of folks' surprise, apparently, Gabby Garcia was born with a vagina. Yes, she was born a cis woman. I haven't checked, but everything that I could find about her indicates that she, yes, was born a cis woman. And yet the argument is that she should be in the ring fighting men because, well, bigotry. Okay, it's just it's bigotry. And it's bigotry, and you know that this legislation is bigotry, and this legislation and this whole anti-trans movement. It's not 100% the fault of the TERFs. It's not 100% the fault of the radical feminists. And yes, I said that. Your boy Chainsaw, the ultimate misogynist of the Ozarks, said that the fault of all of this legislation and bullshit conversations like this is not 100% the fault of radical feminists and TERFs, but you're fucking enabling it with your bullshit every single time you speak out against or on behalf of transphobia, or you fail to allow transphobia to be critiqued because it doesn't meet your definition of what feminism is. You're endangering cis women, you fucking scumbags, by not it's, I mean, the word enabling, Google the shit. You don't know what it means. But anyway, that's I think I've said just about all there is to say about what is a TERF and why should normies care. Um, because you probably maybe a lot closer to some than you even realize. Fuck, you might even be a TERF yourself and not even realize it. Marginalized people, all of us, we got a lot of shit to deal with, and we kind of like standing with each other, even if the colonizers, if you will, uh, don't want to. So, yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. Let me know what you think in the comments. My video on Ron DeSantis and his adventures in Martha's Vineyard got a huge hit from all of that video was a massive viewer count, tons and tons of comments from all of the MAGA Trump supporters. All the ultra MAGA folks came out to show love to your boy Chainsaw, and tell me what a great job I'm doing here. And some of them came out to make fun of JoJo too. That was fun. Um, I'm gonna sell a T-shirt about that, I guess. But yeah, so that's a thing. So I imagine that this video is probably also going to make me just as many friends. Um, Probably with the same kind of vitriolic comments. So that's exciting. But you know what? I don't give a shit. I have literally nothing to be ashamed of when it comes to standing up for marginalized people. Um, Nothing at all. There's nothing more important to me, honestly, than standing in solidarity with people who have been shit on their whole lives, because I quite actually know what that's like, and I don't have to ask another person from another community what it's like to be oppressed. So, there's that. And I'm more than willing to be an ally for folks, or accomplice, if you will, for folks who are in a similar situation for any reason, for whatever the reason. If it's people of color, if it's women, if it's queer folks, of any variety and category. No judgments here. So yeah, that's this one's been a long time coming, and I think I said just about everything there is to say with that regard. And put that in your pipe and smoke it. Listen, if you love this kind of stuff and you just can't get enough, hit me up on social media. Feel free to smash that subscribe button because Jesus Christ, I'm hurting for subscribers, and after this video, I can understand why. So your boy Chainsaw needs all the love he can get. But anyway, I'll catch you on the flippy flip. Also, I believe that was originally spoken by one of those third wave feminists, Megan Jasper from Sub Pop.